Have you heard of the $23 billion plan for Australia to power Singapore? This is fascinating.
It's a small country with a big problem. Singapore set itself an ambitious goal of achieving net zero emissions during the second half of the century, but as it stands, 96% of its energy comes from burning natural gas. And there are very few alternatives to providing energy for its 5.7 million residents.
I don't really know a lot about Singapore, if anything. And I assume that it is a small country with lots of compact living. I don't know if I'm right, but that's just always my initial thoughts on Singapore.
To fix this, there are now plans to build the world's largest solar array in the Australian outback and then connect the two nations by a nearly 4,000 kilometre undersea cable.
How do you even do that? Thousands and thousands of kilometres worth of undersea cable. Wow. And I wonder what the Australians get out of this.
Set to cost 23 billion Australian dollars and create an entirely new export industry in the region, this mega project could be just the beginning for Southeast Asia's energy revolution. Despite being highly developed, Singapore was always going to struggle with its transition to renewable energy. It's one of the world's smallest countries, and the island nation lacks the wide open space needed for solar arrays.
So I was right. I thought I was correct in saying that it's only a small country. So they don't have the facilities to have lots of solar power in wide open spaces that some other countries do, like Australia. So it makes sense to, I suppose, if you're going to try and reach a target, and solar is one of the big sources, then you've got to find space from somewhere.
There aren't suitable rivers for harnessing hydropower. Low average wind speeds and Singapore's location along one of the world's busiest and narrowest shipping lanes rules out offshore wind farms, and geothermal energy sources are non-existent. Still, it has a nice Apple store and a funky-looking hotel with what's probably the world's most awesome pool. Anyway, let's get back to its geographic shortcomings.
This isn't anything to do with the whole video, but look how incredible that is. It's literally a propped up ship. That is incredible. Singapore is one of those places I'd love to go to. And the funny thing is, normally when you fly to Australia, you stop at Singapore or the UAE, somewhere around there. We're not. We're flying to bloody Perth, to Perth, and then to Melbourne. So we don't even get a day in Singapore.
To get around the problems, the Australian-Singaporean company Sun Cable is planning to make use of the abundant solar potential in one of the world's most arid and least populated regions to provide clean energy for one of the world's most densely populated countries. The Australian Asian Power Link, or simply Sun Cable as it's known in media circles, will be a massive solar farm covering more than 120 square kilometres and generating 14 gigawatts of energy in the heart of Australia's Northern Territory.
Bearing in mind, that is nothing. In the grand scheme of things, that tiny little space is nothing. Look, that is the size of what that Singapore can fit into Australia. You know, it is such a tiny, almost insignificant amount of space that Australia can afford to use for solar power. You know, and you think, actually, look how much space Australia has for renewable solar energy. That, you know, yes, I understand there's some wildlife in these areas, but they need to be taking advantage of this. They really do. All this space that is uninhabitable, more or less, got to be used.
That energy will then be stored in a 33 gigawatt hour capacity battery before travelling over 750 kilometres to Darwin using high voltage overhead cables, then a further 3,750 kilometres via undersea high voltage direct current or HVDC transmission cables to eventually provide 20% of Singapore's energy needs.
How do you make a cable that long? How do you do it? It's almost, you know, when you think of things in space that you just can't comprehend and you can't mentally picture. I just can't mentally picture a cable that long that goes under the sea. How do you make that? Like, do you do it in parts? Incredible manufacturing. The human race is incredible what they can achieve.
With 4,500 kilometres separating Singapore from its future energy source, the obvious questions are, what were they thinking and why Australia? Well, while Singapore is surrounded by other much closer countries, none of them can match what the Australian outback has to offer. Yeah, it's not like that. Located just on the edge of the tropics in one of the driest and most solar irradiated places on Earth, the outback provides much greater and more reliable energy potential than Singapore's neighbours, which experience quite a few more rainy days each year. Now, as you might expect, transmitting electricity over long distances, like that patch of ocean between Australia and Singapore, does result in some losses. But this isn't a new issue, and we've known how to solve it since the 1950s. You'll remember from school that by converting alternating current or AC power to direct current or DC power, resistance within the cable can be minimised, and this allows electricity to be transported over much greater distances with less loss. No doubt it's all coming back to you now.
He says that like anyone will remember. I'm sure we learnt about this in school, but I don't remember any of that. That's straight over my head.
Using high voltage direct current or HVDC cables and converters and inverters at either end to make the power usable, electrical losses over the entire length of the sun cable will only add up to around 10%.
Wow.
That's considered an acceptable loss, given that its generation was emission-free. And it's a feat that was proven feasible in 2019 when China opened the 3,293-kilometre ultra-high voltage line.
So it's been done.
With its undersea section stretching for over 3,750 kilometres, depending on the final route, the sun cable will be at least 6 times longer than the world's current longest underwater HVDC. That's the Norned linking Norway and the Netherlands, and 5 times longer than the Viking Link that's currently under construction and set to connect Denmark to the UK. While the undersea part of the journey perhaps presents the biggest challenge for the project, it isn't unachievable, due to the Indonesian archipelago once being a single landmass back during the last ice age when we last left our homes and went to nightclubs. The Java and South China Seas are both relatively shallow, with depths rarely exceeding 100 metres. It's only the Timor Sea that presents a serious obstacle, with sections that drop down to 1,700 metres. As it stands today, the deepest HVDC cable sits at a depth of 1,600 metres between Italy and Sardinia, but Italian cable manufacturer Prysmian is developing technology that can lay cables as deep as 3,000 metres. Though large-scale projects like this can often clash with environmental and indigenous groups, the Sun Cable team has worked alongside government agencies since the project was first proposed, and has even shifted the site of the solar array to avoid building on indigenous land.
It certainly makes sense why environmentalists certainly would get upset. If you think about laying cables in the sea, that cable drops, and you don't know what it's going to land on, what damage it's going to cause to the bed of the sea and whatnot. It's almost the unknown of where you're putting that cable, almost, I think. And you've almost got to think of by doing this, we're trying to save the planet, save the creatures on the earth as well. So you've got to kind of weigh up the pros and cons.
The project is outrageously ambitious, and it might seem pretty far-fetched when you first hear about it. But those involved aren't messing around. The project was added to Infrastructure Australia's priority list, and agreements with the Northern Territory government were signed in early 2021. Subsea surveying started in 2020 and 750 kilometres of the route have now been fully mapped. Construction's due to start in 2023, the system will begin operating in 2026 and it'll be connected to Singapore in 2027.
Wow. Just wow.
With ample room for future growth, a host of developing nations on its doorstep, and demand for clean energy only set to rise, the Sun Cable project sets Australia up to transition from the world's largest exporter of coal to a green energy exporting superpower. And it could act as a model for other regions with similar conditions to maximise their energy production and provide for a growing world. If you liked this video and you want to learn more about where construction is headed, make sure you're subscribed to Tomorrow's Build.
Do that. Do that. Subscribe to Tomorrow's World. I have as well. It's brilliant. And actually, for all the criticism, of the coal and whatnot in Australia that has been exported, there is some signs of using the land for good. Environmentally. My question would be, well, what about for Australia itself? What's being done for Australia itself? But, on the grand scheme of things here, Australia needs to, if they're going to stop you selling coal, they've got to financially kind of be provided for the electricity that they are then getting, instead of the coal. So they have to export it, I think. They have to export it. And actually it makes sense. If they can produce more of this and sell to other nearby neighbours, then maybe that's a good thing. And it mean that coal doesn't have to be dug up as often or for as long, because financially they will be supported. I think this is an amazing project. It's an amazing project because Australia has this land that is pretty much uninhabitable, apart from the odd creature that can survive in it. It's brilliant, and this is ambitious. This definitely is ambitious. And if this is achieved, this will certainly show the world what Australia can do, but also what can be achieved in other areas of the world with similar conditions. Fantastic. Absolutely incredible. What are your thoughts on this? Are you from the Northern Territory? Do you know about this? Is this something you've heard of? Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you like. Make sure you subscribe to Tomorrow's World. And I will catch you next time.